Welcome to Great Comedic Minds by Cara Robertson, a podcast where we meet some of the greatest comedic creators of our time and find out their real stories. From your favorite TV shows, movies, and live stand-up, we interview the storytellers and joke writers who have entertained us for years to find out exactly how and why they do it. And now, here's your host, Cara Robertson.
With Bill Oakley. Bill Oakley is a Portland-based television writer and executive producer. He and his writing partner, Josh Weinstein, are well known for their work on the hit TV show The Simpsons. The pair also created the show Mission Hill and are consulting producers on Futurama. Bill wrote for The Cleveland Show, Regular Show, and the Netflix animation Close Enough. He's won 3 Emmys and a Writers Guild of America award for Best Comedy Variety Talk Series. Bill also wrote what is, in my opinion, the best piece of comedy in history, the infamous steamed ham sketch that was featured in season 7 episode of The Simpsons, 22 short films about Springfield. Excitingly, Bill Oakley has been officially titled as a fast food expert and is appearing on the History Channel show The Food That Built America. Thank you very much for coming today, Bill. Really appreciate your time.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So you were raised on a farm in Maryland, is that correct?
Yes, although it wasn't really so much of a farm. Wasn't really an operating farm. It had some cows and some horses, but that was about it.
Oh, okay. It's like a hobby farm?
It was just the buildings. There were farm buildings, but we didn't have a lot of, animals and crops and stuff.
Okay. What was it like?
It was empty. It was very rural. It was a place, the nearest person was another mile away. The nearest town was a couple miles away. It was different. It was also a very different time because it was like the 70s. And so there was no internet. There was no cell phone. There was TV that had 3 channels on it. And not much else. And and you had to make your own fun, I guess, I would say.
Did you have siblings?
Yes, I did. But they were much older. So by the time I was 6, they had both gone.
So you went to then St. Albans School. I've had a look at people who went to that school, and there's a lot of, because it's near Washington, Congress people, astronauts, that sort of thing. What was that school like?
In retrospect, it was a fancy school. It was, the education was terrific. The people there were dicks. Most of the people there, a lot of the people in my class were jerks, and are jerks now, are famous jerks now. Like, the kind of people that, like, one of the most obnoxious senators in the U.S. was in the class above me. He was a huge jerk in school, and from what I gather, he's a huge jerk now. So, people, I would say, but, there was a certain segment of the class that I got along with very well, including Josh Weinstein, who I'm sure you're going to be talking about in a second. But, in general, like, it's a Washington, D.C. prep school filled with, the sons of rich people and powerful people, and so there was a lot of. I would say I had a fairly good time considering all that, and like it was fun. Definitely, I would say the fun, not so much the school, but the social life of the time of the 80s was really fun because nobody cared what kids were doing. So you could do whatever. This is before cell phones. You could just run amok, and you'd leave. Your parents would say, "Hey, have fun," and then you'd go out, and you wouldn't see that. They wouldn't know where you went or what you were doing, until you came home, and there was no way for them to contact you. It was as a kid during that time, it was really fun.
It's often one of my complaints that humans have been around 300,000 years, but for some reason, we're the first generation that actually has to supervise our children.
Yeah, I get you. I have children, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So how old were you when you met Josh?
14. Josh came to the school in 9th grade.
And you became best friends?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We did. We had similar senses of humor. We had similar interests, and we just kind of became friends very quickly. We started working on the school newspaper together and hanging out together a lot. He was a great addition to the school that we were lacking another person that had similar interests to me. And I was so happy when he arrived and met him in 9th grade, and we became friends and have been great friends for, I don't know how long now, 40 years, 42 years.
Were you funny at school?
I'm not funny now. Like the funny is, I'm not like Conan. There's performing funny, and then there's writing and thinking funny. Like I didn't perform, I don't perform now, although I do somewhat on my Instagram. I can write funny and I think funny and I appreciate funny stuff. I have, Monty Python records and, old videotapes of Green Acres, things like that. But I didn't, I wouldn't say people might think I was odd, but they didn't think I was funny because I didn't come off like, I was not a comedian.
So then you went to Harvard and Josh went to Stanford. So you separated. What did you do at Harvard?
I worked mainly on the Lampoon. I didn't get into Stanford. I wanted to go to Stanford with Josh. I didn't get in. Oh. And so Harvard, of course, I did get into Harvard, and I wanted to go there because of the Lampoon. The Harvard Lampoon, for people who don't know, is the world's oldest humor magazine, founded in 1876. And it is it's responsible for National Lampoon, which was a spin-off of the Harvard Lampoon in the 70s, which was an incredibly successful magazine in the 70s and 80s, made a lot of famous movies like National Lampoon's Animal House, Vacation, things like that, until it basically kind of went under about 10 years ago. Anyway, the Lampoon at Harvard is a very special organization because it not only does it publish the magazine, but it also has this building, which is a castle, basically a castle. It's called the Castle. It's a small castle in Harvard Square. And so there's also a social club kind of aspect to it, which is really fun. And fortunately, I got on to the Lampoon my first semester freshman year, so I really didn't do almost anything else. And I managed to get decent grades while basically doing nothing else but hanging out at the Lampoon my entire career. And Josh came during the summers. We would do projects. We would do parodies of books or newspapers or things like that, and Josh would come visit, and so we'd hang out and work together on those things.
So once you finished that, you then went on to get your first job. How did you do that?
We didn't have any writing jobs for a while. Like we had other jobs. Like Josh got a job writing in advertising. We went back to our hometown of Washington, D.C. Josh got a job working at like some sort of low-level job writing for an advertising agency, writing like recruiting ads for government agencies. And I got a job working at the TV show America's Most Wanted, and writing and doing publicity for them, which was a really fun job. But we still wanted to write comedy. So basically, anytime we heard about something through the grapevine and mainly through our friends from college, they're looking for so-and-so writers for this show. And so finally there was a comedy game show that was starting up in New York. And we got somebody told us they were looking for samples, so we wrote up funny comedy questions, and they liked it, and they hired us. And we moved to New York to work on this show. The show was very fun. I think it was probably over after about 6 months, and then we worked on another similar show from the same people, and then that resulted in finally us. We met enough people. We got hired to work on a show in LA. And so this was about 3 years after college. We got to work on a comedy show in Los Angeles, and we moved to Los Angeles, and the show was canceled after 3 weeks. And then we were unemployed for a very long time, and it was really bad. And we basically were going to give up. And because we were running out of money, we were on unemployment, and we couldn't break into comedy. We didn't have any comedy jobs. And we weren't succeeding. I decided to go work for the State Department, which is like the diplomatic version of, we have in the U.S. It's the Department of Overseas stuff. So I applied for their exam. You have to take the Foreign Service exam, and they sent it to me. And the exam was so hard. I had no idea it was going to be so hard. There was all sorts of complicated geopolitical stuff that I didn't know, and I was fairly well informed. And so I was like, okay, well, let's try writing one more sample script. And so Josh and I decided to write one more sample script. And people who had read our sample script up to that time were like, these are fine, but they're not going to get you noticed. You got to write a script for a show that you love. And right around that time, a show called The Seinfeld Chronicles had come out. And it later became Seinfeld, but it was only on like 4 episodes. And we thought it was the best show on TV. And even though most people had not heard of it at that time, we decided to write a sample episode of the Seinfeld Chronicles. And we wrote it, because we did like that show. We wanted to make it really, really good as the show was. And we wrote a really, really good script that got a lot of attention. It got us the agent who had been kind of stringing us along, loved it, immediately signed us, sent it out to everybody. And people agreed that it was great. And like, we got a whole bunch of meetings. at all the big shows of that time. And including The Simpsons, the guys at The Simpsons read it, even though one of them had not even heard of Seinfeld at the time. And so that was basically what happened. That was basically our big break, was writing that script. It was giving up, admitting that our previous scripts were not so good, giving up, reaching the point of no return and saying, okay, fine, one more script. And so we wrote that one script, and it turned out to be really good because it was for a show we liked and a show that we were able to capture the voice of. And that basically, the Simpsons guys liked it, and they decided that they were going to give us a freelance episode. And they had a story that Conan O'Brien had made up called Marge Gets a Job, about Marge getting a job at the power plant, Mr. Byrne falling in love with her. And we wrote that. They liked it. I don't think they loved it, but they liked it enough. And around that time, we had all these meetings. We were already going to get hired. We had already been offered a job on a show. I don't know if you guys know Murphy Brown, but there was a hugely successful show in the 80s called Murphy Brown. And the creator of that had a spinoff of that show called, not a spinoff, a new show called Love and War. So Josh and I had been hired to work on Love and War, and they were already in the process of getting us our computer. The thing is, we didn't know, what do we know about romance? We're not romance writers. This show was a romance, and it was not like we were very, very honored to be hired by this lady who created Murphy Brown. Dan English is her name. But we were just a little worried that this wasn't going to be the show that we were going to be able to write that well. And we knew The Simpsons was a show that we could write really well. And so we had our agent, before we started at Love and War, we asked our agent, could you please just call The Simpsons and ask if they would ever consider hiring us? And he did, and they did. It was the biggest example of, like, you got to make that call. You got to take that risk, because just right around that time, Jay Kogan and Wally Wolodarski had suddenly decided to leave The Simpsons, thereby leaving an office with two desks in it and a slot for two more writers. And they liked our script enough that they hired us. And that was kind of the beginning of, that was the whole thing. There was a series of events that happened in that 1 year period where it was just kind of things happened. We kept, we wrote that script. We got that assignment. We asked our agent to make that call. We were just like, we were having strokes of good luck, but we were also, pushing it a little bit and saying, would you call and just ask if they would ever consider hiring us? And the fact that worked was amazing.
It was already a well-established show at this point, so was there quite a lot of pressure to live up to that sort of standard?
Oh yeah, we didn't know what we were doing. Like, we had never worked on a regular show, on a regular sitcom. We'd only worked on those variety shows. And when we got hired, they made it give us the title of story editors, which later we found out that's the lowest title. That's basically the second lowest title on the TV show. But we didn't even know what it was. And we were like, oh my God, we're going to have to rewrite the scripts. We thought we were going to be rewriting the scripts. And we literally didn't know what it was. And we were tossed into the room immediately. Like, there's no like, welcome to the show, or like, here's a tour, let's explain what's going on. You just start. You're in the room. They're like, you get there, and it's like, you get a call, say they're getting together, and you start in the room. Like, there's no introductory period. And we were just thrown into the room with 10 of the greatest comedy writers of all time. And it was extremely intimidating. Oh my God. Like, I think the thing is, the first couple of weeks, you just kind of sit there and you listen to figure out what the rhythms of the room are. And then gradually you start pitching things. You get the confidence enough to pitch stuff that goes in the script. And I remember, because I used to write down everything I got that went in, and many of the things were not really jokes, but were just kind of wording changes and stuff like that. And then at that time, we also made friends with Conan. Conan had been hired. He was just hired a few months before us. He was one of the only guys that they'd hired since day one. And we were like the second guys that hired since day one. Conan kind of showed us around, and we became very good friends with him. And over time, I think, after about 4 or 5 months, we kind of rose to the level of everyone else in the room. We wrote another episode that went about Marge going to jail, which in the first draft was very well received. And then what happened, another strange thing happened, where everybody left. Like, literally, the staff, 80 to 90% of the staff just left. They all got other jobs. They all got development deals. This was back when a development deal was a big thing in Hollywood, where they pay you just to make up your own show. So they all left, and it was and for a brief period of about 6 to 8 weeks, it was Conan, me and Josh, and Dan McGrath, who had just been hired like weeks before, were the only employees, were the only writers on the show. And it was really weird. but it was incredibly. It was the funnest time probably we ever had there because there was nobody in charge, and we were just making up episodes and working on them ourselves. Anyway, that's the end of that chapter, I think.
You won 3 Primetime Emmy Awards. So what was that like?
Each one was a little different. Like, because some of the ones, the thing about the Emmy Awards is that a lot of it is incredibly fake. And like, you see on The Simpsons, when you look at the credits on The Simpsons, they're like 20 people that are producers, executive producers, supervising producers. Okay, most of those are writers, just at different levels of writers. How much more seniority they have and how much they get paid. So when a show gets nominated for an Emmy, everybody with a title above producer is on the thing, right? Even though many of them never even saw the episode that won the Emmy, right? So in the case of the first one we won, we had barely been involved in that episode at all because we were writing a script when that episode was mainly done. And we were thrilled to have won the Emmy and to have our name on it. But we didn't really deserve anything for it. Then the second one we really deserved, that's the one of all of them, which is the one from the John Waters Homer's Phobia episode, because Josh and I, it was George's idea and Ron Howard wrote the script, but we kind of we supervised, we rewrote that thing. It was partially our idea and so forth. And it was like, we were instrumental to the success and the execution of Homer's Phobia. So that's the one that when I have it, I'm like, this is the one that I truly deserve. Then the other one, the third one, was another one like that first one where we were barely even there when that episode was made. But so I have one Emmy that I truly deserve. The other 2 are kind of fake. But I have plenty of other, and there are many other things that I didn't get nominated for. Like Futurama won an Emmy for that Roswell episode, which both Josh and I spent a huge amount of time working out. But since we were only consulting producers, we were below the cutoff. So we didn't get one for that. So it all kind of, it works out somewhat.
Yeah, I was actually looking up when I was doing your bio. I was trying to find that episode you're just talking about. I was a bit confused about what you did on it, so it's good to know because I could not find you in the credits and then find you in other bits and pieces.
I mean, we worked out a lot of the story. We didn't do any typing writing, but we worked out a lot of the story in the room on that because I was a big Roswell buff. So we definitely contributed.
So after The Simpsons, you started creating some of your own shows as well. So Mission Hill, what gave you the idea to do that?
It was the Simpsons style show. Mission Hill, what gave us the idea was that on The Simpsons, there almost, other than Otto, there are no characters between the ages of 12 and 30, literally. And so, and Otto is not that fun. So we were like, let's do a show where almost all the characters are between the ages of 12 and 30. And so we came up, Mission Hill is a very Simpsons style show, except it takes place in a city, and it's about kind of young, hip urbanites, and the main characters are 17 and 24. So we get to deal with the Simpsons style universe, and then we have other, lots of supporting characters of various ages and ethnicities, but that was the idea for that show. And the thing about it, I still think it's one of the best things we ever did. Unfortunately, it was on the wrong network at the wrong time, and it didn't succeed, and it got canceled almost immediately. But then it had this happy ending where it was picked up by Adult Swim, Cartoon Network's Adult Swim in the US. And they basically ran our episodes over and over and over every night for like 5 years, generating this very large fan base around the world, which we still have today.
If you want to, if you're listening, you can watch it all on YouTube as well.
Yeah, all the best versions of it are on YouTube, and we're actually working on trying to pick the show up, trying to start the show again. And so we've been pitching it around to various networks, and whatever network, if one of them decides to buy it, they will get the rights to put, that's why it still hasn't been on a streaming service in all this time, because it's being saved for whichever network decides to buy the new Mission Hill. And the new Mission Hill, by the way, is the same as the old Mission Hill. It's just the second season of it.
Okay, so it's set in the same time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a period piece now. It wasn't a period piece then, but now it is. Set in 1999.
So you as well, you've been reviewing fast food.
Yes. Yeah. Does not pay any money. That is my hobby. And I have for the past almost 4 years now been doing, it actually has gone well beyond fast food, although most of my videos are still about fast food. If you check out, anybody who's interested in this, go to my Instagram account, that Bill Oakley on Instagram. I'm also that on Twitter, but the fast food stuff's mainly on Instagram. So I do video reviews that are somewhat funny. of fast food items. And then I also, and on my Instagram story, review all sorts of other types of food, fast snack food, frozen food, stuff from all over the world. Kara, you sent me some stuff from Australia, which I'm very excited to try, that I have right here. I actually had that burger relish the other night. It was delicious. I have been, and I have made, and by sheer force of will, I have made myself into somewhat of a celebrity in the food world. And I have, I'm going to be on, I'm already appearing on The Food That Built America on the History Channel, which was coincidentally my favorite show before I even got on it in this third season. I'm going to be on Somebody Feed Phil. I already filmed that. I have been, Burger King used one of my videos in their commercials. And I'm actually now writing a book proposal about this topic as well. So at some point, I hope that it begins to pay money, and then I can do less of this TV writing thing, which is a slog. And making the videos and stuff is really fun, but it's very time consuming. So, I'd rather be able to devote more time to that instead of having to chase down or having to also convince TV net. It's not any easier or more fun these days to get a network to buy your show than it was 20 years ago. Having to go pitch shows to people who don't understand them or want them is very annoying and has never been never gets any more fun or easier unless you become one of those producers who just sell the stuff automatically. If you have a huge hit like Dick Wolf or whatever, that you could just get your show sold without having to go through this process, then you're in good shape. But for the rest of us, you still have to go, even though there's so many places to sell shows these days, there's an equal number of people trying to sell stuff. So it's not like it's any easier than it was. And it's not like they're more desperate for content because they're getting thousands more people coming through the doors with the content. Furthermore, it's a questionable value. Like, this is one of the things that I always wonder, there's lots of shows that Netflix has 40 new shows a week. Most of them you never even hear about. Like, they get 8 hours of publicity from Netflix, and then people they're already forgotten by the end of the week. And how many people saw them? Probably in many cases less than saw one of my videos on Instagram. So and those cost nothing. And I have whatever, some of them have 40,000 views. The Netflix show costs $1 million and has less than 40,000 views. I mean, at some point, you have to figure out, the money is obviously great that you get from Netflix, but in terms of your show being well known, my Instagram videos are more well known than a third of the stuff that appears on Netflix. That's the thing that has become this weird reality these days.
I think the Instagram food review videos are ASMR. I think they're relaxing. Yeah,
people do like them. There's a lot of people who find them really relaxing for some reason. Even the ones that I do that are really frantic. But yeah, there's something about them that I can't quite put my finger on, that people, especially younger people, find them relaxing. Maybe it's just that they're seeing a middle-aged white man who's not furious about something, because that's what all you ever see on TV these days is that could be it. But anyway, I enjoy doing those. It's a really fun hobby. Maybe someday it will start paying money, and I will be able to do less having to sell stuff to online services, streaming services.
You were giving advice to young writers who are trying to get into the industry. What would be the number one thing you'd say?
Here, this is the thing. It's not the same as it was. This is what's the weird thing. It's much different than it was when I was getting into the industry. Okay. When I was getting into writing, there were 4 TV channels and a couple of cable channels, right? And there were basically 80 shows on the air, 80 shows period on the air. So once you had broken into the universe of, you got your script read at a certain place, or you got hired at a certain place, you were in the TV writing business. And then you go, keep getting jobs, writers' rooms and things like that for years. But it's not the same anymore. It's not the same, also because those shows all had 22 episodes a year, so you'd have a full-time job for as long as you wanted it in general, as long as, presuming you could deliver the goods. Okay? That's not the case anymore. It is the case for a very small number of shows, which is there mainly cop shows, drama shows on CBS, but every other show they order 6 episodes of or 8 episodes of. You come in, the writers come in, they work for 10 weeks, and then they're gone. And so, like, it's not, again, and then you have to go find another job, and it happens 3 times a year. Even on shows that are successful, for instance, like Disenchantment. I worked on Disenchantment with Josh, Matt Groening's show. Like, that show, we all worked on the show for about 8 months, and then we were gone for 2 years. And like, people can't survive being unemployed for 2 years. They have to go find other stuff, and that's the way that it works now. So let me point this out. I think that this is all leading to an important point, which is you have to be your own. You have to have a slightly more entrepreneurial approach to it than you did in the old days. The old days, it was a very clear process where you would write a funny spec script. You get the script into the right hands, then you would get a job, then you'd be all set. Now, even after you have the job, you're not all set. You have to have other things going on. Okay, now the second part of this is you don't necessarily need the script to break in. Lots of people have been hired these days on TV shows because they are famous for their funny Twitter feed, or they're famous for their YouTube videos, or things like that. And so you could do that. Now, ideally, you would have both. You would have your hilarious YouTube channel, and you would have a really great spec script as well. So that if somebody said, "Hey, do you have a script? We're hiring for a show," you'd be prepared, and you'd say that. So you'd have, that would be the best thing. However, let me also say, if you had a really successful YouTube channel, why would you want someone else's job on Netflix? Because you're already making your own money. You're already making more money with more job security than you'd get from working in someone else's writer's room on a show where whatever. That's the other thing. Like, it's now possible to have a more successful career without having to even go through the process that people have had to go through years. I mean, not everybody, and it's hard, obviously, to get 1 million or 10 million viewers on YouTube. But is it harder than breaking in and working your way up to executive producer of a TV show? I don't know that it is.
If we finish with a game, is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This game, it's called, Is This More of a Weekend Thing?
Very good.
So I'm going to name a food item, and you have to tell me, is it a real food item, or like a fast food item, or is it an obscure reference from one of your shows?
Okay.
Good. The first one is the Colossus Burger.
I think that's a reference to Dr. Colossus in Who Shot Mr. Burns Part 2, and not a real item.
So that one's both. I wanted to start with one where it was both, but yeah, it definitely was. He's one of my favorites. That guy. I wish he would come back. Okay, the second one is called Fist Pump Fries.
I think that's real.
That is from regular show, season 1, episode 3. That's the band that they Mordecai did.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Number 3, the Earthquake Ham.
I think that's fake.
That's it's from Close Enough. It's the food that's not in the deep freezer when Emily's stressed.
Okay.
Number 4, a baby chino.
That's real. That's got to be real.
Yeah, that's real. Do you have those in America?
No, I've never heard of it, but it certainly sounds like something we'd have.
Yeah, it's like
I would say maybe they have it some places. They don't have it at Starbucks, to my knowledge.
It's basically just frothy milk, and when a mum goes in, she orders herself a cappuccino, and she orders a...
Oh, I bet they do have that.
Yeah, they probably have it. It started in Australia and New Zealand. So the next one is a thin stew made of fish, vegetables, prawns, coconut milk, and 4 kinds of rice, called a Vietnamese stew.
That's Principal Skinner. That's what Principal Skinner ate when he was a prisoner of war in Vietnam.
Yeah, that's right. You're the first. I'm trying to work that recipe into every single podcast somewhere.
Uh-huh.
A Graporo burger.
A what?
Graporo burger.
I don't know what. I think that's real. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's in Japan.
Okay.
It is a patty consisted of a breadcrumb crust and stuffed with macaroni, shrimp, and white sauce.
Oh, wow. That sounds pretty good.
And the last one, a Bunnings sausage sanger.
That's from Australia. That's a real thing in Australia, right?
Yes. I can't believe you know that. Yeah.
Because isn't that the one that I can never remember which one is the one that you get on election day There's two different ones. There's one that you get on election day, and there's one that you get at the hardware store, and they might be the same thing.
It's the hardware store. Yeah, people go there. They don't even go into the hardware store. Like a lot of people just rock up just for the sausage out the front.
That I got to try those someday. It sounds really good.
Well, yeah, that's it. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us, and yeah, I hope you. Good luck with all your future shows that you're working on, and your future.
Thank you very much. I hope this was informative.
It was great. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on a great episode of Great Comedic Minds. We'll be back next week, so be sure to tune in. Also, like, share, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to follow Cara Robertson on Instagram.